Welcome, everyone, to Textiles and Tea with the Hand Weavers Guild of America. I'm Kathy Group. I'm the advertising manager, and I get to be your host today. Today, our sponsor is Weavers of the North Shore. We are so excited to have our Arctic North patrons with us today. We appreciate all the support that we've gotten from the Weavers Guild of the North Shore, and we welcome you today. Thank you so much. If you have questions, as always, if you'll put them in the Q&A and not in the chat, it's hard to keep an eye on the chat and what's going on over there. But if they're in the Q&A, I will see them and we'll try to get to as many questions as we can today. Today, we have Brianna Bibbs, and we're excited to have Brianna. She is a Chicago-based artist, again, back up there in the Arctic North, who works in the intersection of textiles, painting, and community-based practices. Brianna earned her Bachelor of Fine Arts with emphasis in fiber and material studies at the School of Art at the Art Institute of Chicago. She is the founder of We Were Never Alone Project, a weaving workshop for victims and survivors of domestic abuse. And we're going to talk more about that today. I can't wait to hear her talk about this. And she serves on the Surface Design Association's Education Committee. She has exhibited at galleries and museums such as the Chicago Artists Coalition, the Museum of Science and Industry, Praxis, Fiber Workshop, the Purple Window Gallery, and George Marshall Store Gallery. She has recent awards and residencies that include the Lunder Institute for American Art Summer Residential Fellowship, the Surf Point Foundation Artist Residency, and Aeromont School of Arts and Crafts Winter Pentaculum. So welcome, Brianna. It's wonderful to have you here.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This is great.
Well, our first question is always so important. It's what is your favorite tea?
Oh, I love a good, I think it's called like a lemon zinger tea.
Mm.
It's one of my favorites. I actually grew up on sleepy time tea. My Mima used to give that to me a lot when I was a kid, just to kind of zone out in the middle of the night. So yeah, those are my two favorite teas.
Oh, great. Thank you. So how did you get started in fiber arts?
Well, I went to the School of the Art Institute of Chicago for my undergrad, my BFA. And I initially went into the painting department, and I had had these really great ideas of being an abstract painter.
Uh-huh.
But I want to say it was towards my first year, towards the end of my first year, I was not fulfilled in the way that I guess I had wanted to be. So I had seen when we were picking out our courses, I had seen that there was an intro to fiber and material studies. And so I didn't really know what that meant, but I knew that there would be a possibility of learning how to quilt. And I grew up around a lot of quilts. My grandfather, who grew up in Alabama, used to quilt a lot with his mother and his grandmother. And I always used to ask him, can you teach me how to quilt? And he never remembered how. And so when I saw the intro to fibers class, I thought, okay, I'm going to learn how to quilt. Never learned. That was not one of the things that we learned. We learned how to knit and crochet. And then eventually we learned how to weave. And I initially thought I was going to hate it just because of how tedious it is and how labor intensive it is. But something about it just was really relaxing. And so I stuck with it.
That's interesting to hear people say that, you see new weavers and are like, am I ever going to get to the weaving part? It's
Exactly.
like,
And that's how I was feeling too. I was like, okay, when do we get to the part where we actually like make something? Because it was took too much time to dress the loom and all of that. But
well, good for
yeah,
us that you hung in there. We appreciate
yeah.
that. You have done several commissions, and one of them we're going to talk about today is the Ryan Center at the Chicago Art Institute. Now, this is an image of the multi-sensory display at the center. Can you tell us about how this came about?
Yeah, so I have the pleasure of collaborating with Museum Education at the Art Institute. I've assisted with quite a few programs and have also led programs. And so they had asked me to make work based off of what's in the Art Institute's collection. And so obviously they asked me to do some weavings. And so I ended up choosing a Germantown Eye Dazzler piece that's stunning. And then also looked into the African arts department and was really inspired by the use of raffia and mass. And so there's two pieces within this installation shot, the one on the upper right, and then this kind of like colorful one that's orange and blue and red are inspired by both of those pieces. So what's really great about it is I think a lot of the times when we go in museums, at least that's how I am, I'm like, oh, I want to touch it, right? You kind of want to get in it. And this kind of allows you to do that. The raffia piece makes this like beautiful noise, which is how those African masks were made, is to make these sounds. And so it's been really great to see people interact with them and just kind of like ruffle that up.
Mhm.
And then it's also really great too, in terms of the Eye Dazzler weaving inspiration piece. It's really great to see people interact with that and know what, churro wool feels like.
Oh, okay. You had churro wool in it.
Yeah,
Now,
that's what the entire piece is made of.
are all of these on the wall yours, or was this a collaboration with other artists?
No, so we actually, none of the artists met each other. The weird thing about this was all done like during the pandemic.
Mhm.
So we had made these in our studios, and so there's other pieces that are there by other artists, that are metal or marble or wood. And if you have the chance to go to the Art Institute, I highly recommend just playing with this because it's a lot of fun.
Well, we have your two of your pieces. Did you have two pieces?
I did, yeah,
Okay,
just
we
two
have your
pieces.
two pieces we're going to look at here. And that kind of helps people, I think, understand more what you were talking about. Now, did they say, okay, we need you to make this or this, and we need it to look like that? Or were you pretty open to being able to make it any way you wanted?
I would say there was more of a collaboration with the churro wool piece. They really wanted there to be different textures and different patterns within that piece. And so there's like a pick and pick in here. There's some interlocking weft. There's raya. There's braided pieces. Just kind of all over the place. But the raffia piece, I really wanted to make sure that it had just these long raffia strands, so that way people could interact with it and hear the sound that it makes.
Yeah, that's amazing. So how long have these been up?
Those have been up, I want to say, going on 2 years now. So it's been up for a while.
Okay.
To my
Yeah.
understanding, it's going to be a permanent collection. So I've done quite a few repairs on them already because people are having a field day with them. But that's really exciting to me because it shows that people are really interacting with it.
I love it that you mentioned that in a building where it's constantly don't touch.
Right.
They have this space where you're invited to touch, and good for them. To let people in there, especially kids, you know.
Yeah, the kids love the raffia one. They love the sound that it makes, and a few of them have kind of like stood under it and like pretended it was their hair or something. It's really interesting to see how people interact with these weaving.
Oh, I bet. Yeah. Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
You are also did a series called the Quarantine Series, speaking of COVID. And you said it was an educational study on weaving and that you had to use materials on hand because, well, a lot of us didn't have access to other materials. And that the work showed the various materials that you can use. So could you talk more about that series and did you find you learned something about materials and did you learn something about yourself as you were working on this?
Yeah, so this series started in March of 2020, so right when we had our shelter in place. This came at a really interesting time for me because in late 2019, I had left my job to be an artist full time.
Ouch.
And I know, right? Uh, and so, and so I really was expecting right after I left my job to make these kind of large scale pieces. And then when COVID happened, that was no longer the case. I didn't go to my studio that has my floor loom. I just decided to stay at home. And I had a few cardboard looms that were left over from workshops that I'd done in the Art Institute and use those and then use these materials that I'd had in my apartment. And so I didn't really know entirely where the series is going. I just knew that I wanted to make. There's a total of 51 in the series. So there's quite, yeah, there's quite a few.
Yeah.
And so I was taking things like the one on the far right, I was taking old cotton yarn that I'd had and just was working with that and old clay that I'd had in one of my bins in my apartment and was making these weird little objects. And then the one in the middle is actually made out of junk mail. So I'm sure we were all like getting rid of papers and stuff like that. And so I had taken some old junk mail and had thrown it in a blender and had thrown some chalk in there. That's where you get all the colors from. And made these paper strips and decided to weave with those. But then at some point, I'd really missed spinning and I'd really missed using a drum carder. So I'd gone on eBay and found my glorious Louette S15 spinning wheel that I still have because it's in like perfect shape. And I started to spin again because that's something that I really hadn't done at that point since I had graduated, which is where the one on the far left comes from.
Yeah, I do want to point out again because, and maybe I already figured that out, but it took me a while to notice that the one on the far right with the blue one, that's clay. I thought it was some kind of a cord, right? And
Yeah, it
that's
is.
clay,
It is
right?
clay. Yeah, the little brown, you can kind of tell because the clay at the bottom is broken. And I decided to leave it that way. Something about my work is it's like whatever happens to it just kind of happens.
Hmm.
Um, and I enjoy that. Um, but yeah, that's all clay.
Well, the next images we're going to show are from the Natural series. And this is part of, I think I have this right. This was part of a residency that you did from the Chicago Mills Warp residency for 2020. So would you talk some about the residency and then talk some about the work?
Yeah, so the Chicago Weaving Mill is great. Highly recommend it if you all are not familiar with that space, but I'm sure most of you are. They have a warp residency that typically takes place in person. I'm not sure if they're running it right now, but at the time they were. And so they were doing a remote residency because obviously this was taking place during the pandemic. And so they had gotten a donation of raw recycled cotton. And so they had posted on Instagram that, you know, if you wanted this cotton, they'll give it to you. You just have to pay 15 bucks for the shipping. And so a bunch of people obviously had nothing to do during that time. And they left it up to us to, you know, do whatever we wanted to do with that cotton. And so for me, it was important just to kind of experiment with it. And then because I was getting back into the swing of things with spinning, I wanted to kind of experiment with more cellulose kind of natural fibers. So the ones on the far right are flax and hemp that's hand spun on my spinning wheel. And then I also wanted to, again, kind of go with this idea of incorporating found objects. So I had found some denim jeans that I can no longer wear because there were holes in them. And so I cut those up and then use that in the weavings as well. And I believe there's 17 or 18 in that series too.
Well, it was interesting that they provided the recycled cotton. That's an interesting guideline or concept, whatever you want to call it. And I was curious about what was the best and the worst aspects of having the material provided to you and say, you got to use this.
Well, because I was starting to get back into spinning and using the drum carder again, I want to say that was probably the worst thing, is I was like, what am I going to do with this? And also like using this in the drum carder, it was like a disaster. Like I had to clean it a zillion times. But I learned a lot from it, and I learned a lot about materiality. Something to note about this series, as well as the quarantine series, and really all of my work, is that there's no sketching involved, there's no planning involved. Um, I just do it. Like whatever I have on hand, it's just a very intuitive thing to just weave. And however it ends up, that's kind of how it ends up.
Can you tell, you may have just said this, but let me make sure. How big are these?
Oh, those vary in size. The loom I was using at that time was still the cardboard loom. So the
Okay.
looms were 13, I want to say 9 by 13 inches. So it's around that scale.
I love it that you used a cardboard loom because there's so many people are like, well, I can't weave. The equipment's too expensive and it's too big and I can't have it in my apartment. You know, you're the poster child for, nope, that's not true. You know, you can do some weaving inexpensively and it doesn't have to be huge.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, I really didn't have a full appreciation of the cardboard loom or frame looms or whatever until the pandemic happened, because
Hmm.
I thought that, all of my work was going to exist being made on the floor loom, right? And then the pandemic kind of forced me to think differently.
This next piece is called Numb. And not only is this just got wonderful texture, I would just love to get my hands in there and feel it all. But the color is gorgeous. So can
Thank
you
you.
talk some about your, I don't know, theory or your view on color? You know, how do you approach it when weaving with it, that kind of thing?
Yeah, so this piece is actually titled Alone Against It All. There's
Oh,
another
I'm
piece
sorry.
that's,
I
no, it's
called it
all
the wrong
good.
thing.
Yeah, no, it's okay. It's very similar to Numb though. It's,
Okay.
the same kind of hand spun madness. But this piece I had done during my fellowship with the Lunder Institute for American Art. And so this piece is very near and dear to my heart because I had to complete this in 6 weeks. And this piece is 5.5 by 5.5 feet. Um, so no, I did not get a lot of sleep. There was a lot of overnights to make sure that I was spinning everything and, you know, adding certain elements of needle felting that you can't see because the hand spinning is just like exploding all over the place. Um, but again, this piece goes back to me being intuitive. So a lot of my work has to deal with mental health and trauma, and most recently, grief. And so that's what this piece is for me. I had chosen not to do color symbolism in this piece, which is something that I tend to do with my larger scale works as I think about color and whatever story I'm trying to tell. But this piece was done using grab bags or scrap bags from a wool supplier. And so whatever colors they sent me, I just rolled with it. And if I wanted to change anything, I had my drum carder there to just kind of, experiment and create different colors and textures and things like that.
What was the importance for you of spinning everything? I mean, you could have just gone out and bought some, you know, yarn, but you wanted to spin it. What was that about?
Yeah, I did. And that took up a lot of time. I mean, really, I probably, if I didn't spin it all, right, I probably could have gotten a little bit more sleep. But something about creating things by hand, like, no, I'm not dyeing this, right? So I'm not like completely involved in the process. But I think for me, there's a lot of joy in people coming up and saying, oh, where'd you get this yarn? I'm like, nope, made it, spun it, carded it, did all the things. Um, and so that for me has been really enjoyable. And then also being able to experiment with these different textures and seeing how different breeds spin differently than others, things like that. I don't know. I can go on about that for a while, but for me, it's just really exciting.
Well, all the spinners are going, yes, yes, we get it. You get us, you know.
Yes. Yeah. I love spinning. I really do.
Well, that's great. So did you learn spinning at the Art Institute?
I did. Yeah. I took a
Yeah.
class called Twist with Jerry Bleem, who's amazing. And I didn't really know what it meant, but I was interested in it. And yeah, I did a lot of applying, a lot of spinning, and yeah, it definitely stuck with me.
Well, your colors are amazing. They're bright and bold and they just grab you, but you also do some incredible work in neutrals or whites. So this next image is of an example of an all-white piece. And if I'm correct, Delta purchased this and it's now, or at one point, I don't know if it still is or not, at the Chicago O'Hare Airport. So when you shift from color to white, how do you decide on the structure and the materials? I mean, it has to be a different kind of thought process, right?
Kind of.
Kind of.
So maybe this this piece was actually done for the Chicago Artists Coalition Hatch residency that I had done from 2021 to 2022. And it's done on a floor loom, and they're actually shredded notes and journals from a relationship that I was in for a decade that was super, super toxic. And so I shredded all of those journals and notes and then wove them on the floor loom. So because those writings were done in black and sometimes red, that's where the color comes from in this. Um, and so this was the last piece that I'd done on the floor loom.
Were
And
they
it is still there, by the way. It's
okay?
still up. So
Okay, good. Now, are they individual panels that you've sewn together, or were they woven separately on the loom?
so they're woven in strips. So each strip is roughly like 5 inches wide. And then the length of it is 65 inches roughly. Some of them, I'm sure, as you can tell, a little bit longer. But they're just individual strips. And so how they were installed in the exhibition for the Hatch residency is they were closer together and it was just all one line. But because Delta had a huge wall to fill up, they decided to break it into different parts, which I still love because it still shows length and time and all of those things.
Now, is it I can't tell from the photo, is it a plain weave?
It is, yeah.
Okay.
All of my work is done, give or take a few pieces are done in plain weave.
Why is that? What is it about plain weave?
Um, I think there's a lot of things that can obviously be done without having to have like all these crazy fancy structures. For me, it's just nice to be able to create something that's impactful and meaningful to me and in a way that's like so simple, right? Like plain weave is something that everybody knows. It's the first thing everybody learns. And so to be able to create pieces like this, right, which were like really hard for me to make because of the content of the work,
Mhm.
it was still really nice to just have it be in plain weave, you know?
Yeah, I love it when we've had a couple of artists recently who have like, nope, I just do plain weave, you know? It's
Yeah,
like, all right,
yeah,
all right.
it's nice, right? Yeah.
Um, now we're going to talk some about your project that you did called We Were Never Alone Project, the We Were Never Alone Project. So, and I think we have an image of is it your poster? And then some,
Yeah, it's a logo.
yeah, your
And
logo. And then these are some of the work that the folks have done. So I'm going to just let you take off and tell us about this program. And well, I'll let you do it.
yeah, so the We Were Never Alone project is something that I had thought about in 2020. Um, I was reading a lot of articles and things like that about victims being unable to leave their abusive situations because of the shelter in place rules. And so this is something that I'm unfortunately a survivor of. That's the previous piece. That's why it was so big, because I had a lot to say. But when I was facilitating weaving workshops at the Art Institute, I realized how calming and relaxing weaving was to people.
Mhm.
And so thinking about that and then thinking about what victims were going through at that time, I just wanted to create space for people and create community for people. And so the project sometimes will happen at local galleries or art spaces. They'll also happen if I have an exhibition, I try to host one or two at the same time that I have an exhibition. And really, people will go to the We Were Never Alone project.com site and will RSVP. And it's a very small, intimate setting. It's not, you know, 20 people in the same room. I try to limit it to at least 6 people.
Mm.
So that way everybody feels comfortable sharing their stories and, you know, feel seen and heard because as a survivor, you personally speaking, you don't always feel that. And so it's really important to me to make sure that everybody um, feels a sense of calm and relaxation while sharing these really horrendous stories.
So do people sign up ahead of time or is it an open studio one day a week or how do you do that?
Yeah, so they kind of happen. There's no set schedule. They happen whenever I can host them. So, you know, I might host them 1 month and then have, you know, 3 months in between and then we'll host it again. But yeah, people will sign up um, via the website and then they'll get a confirmation from me within 28 to 48 hours saying that they have signed up for the workshop. And then they come, it's free because I supply everything. So nobody has to pay for anything at all. And yeah, that's it.
Well, I love this concept and because in a former life I was an art therapist and most of my work was done with survivors. And so when I was reading about this, it just, you know, it spoke to me and I love that you did this. So I'm curious, and this is from an art therapy point of view, what did you find was so why how did the material work well for them? What was it about weaving that worked well with these women and what they've been through?
Well, I think for the most part, everybody that participates, I've maybe only had 2 people that have woven before. Everybody's a first time weaver.
Uh-huh.
And so, you know, everybody's a little skeptical in the beginning of, you know, am I going to like freak out about everything? Am I going to be a perfectionist? And so I think when people start weaving and conversations start happening, people kind of let their guards down and just let things naturally happen. Like there's no, I've yet to have somebody take that, participate in this and say like, oh, I need to be a perfectionist, or oh my gosh, I have to have this selvage be right, or you know, whatever. I think it's just being able to make art with no expectations, and also being able to have conversations with other people that understand where you're coming from.
I think it would also be good that you have the, and what kind of what you're saying is the success factor in it, is that when they're done, it's theirs and they made it. And I think that's
Mm-hmm.
wonderful. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's a like having taught so much in different places, whether it be centers or institutions, I've learned that people put less pressure on themselves with weaving, which is very different to how I've seen people react with other mediums, like
Mhm.
painting and drawing. People are always like, you know, I can't get it to look this way. I can't get it to be this thing, but weaving is not that way at all. And so I feel like having that medium paired with the project just makes a lot of sense. Although I'm biased because I'm a weaver. So
But you're right. You
yeah,
might be biased, but
yeah,
you're right.
exactly. Yeah.
Well, do you have funding for this program? Are you able to get people to support you? Or are you just doing this on your own?
I'm doing it on my own. I've had people give me yarn. You know, they're like, "Oh, my grandmother had all this
Yeah,
yarn.
yeah,
Please,
yeah.
I don't know what to do with it." And that's great. Like, you know, I'll take it. I actually have too much now, believe it or not.
Yeah, yeah, I know.
Um, yeah, so but yeah, other than that, it's all me.
You're a good person. That's a wonderful
Thank
thing that
you.
you do.
Thank you.
So what's next for you?
Oh, what is next? I'm waiting to hear back on some residencies. So everybody keep your fingers crossed on that for me. I'm weaving, you know, the smaller scale pieces still, but they're called the journal series. And so right now, my grandfather, who I talked about earlier in this, passed away in December. So that's been very hard. But I had recently taken a hospital blanket that he was sent home with
Hmm.
before he passed away and took out all of the weft. And so I'm weaving with that in my journal series pieces. So yeah, that's kind of what I'm doing right now.
Your work is so intimate for you, isn't it? It's not, oh, I'm going to make something. Your work really is connected to things in your life and your own relationships and your feelings, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, I never the journal series, which we didn't talk about this time, but the journal series literally is just, it feels like a journal. And I currently have an exhibition up at the Chesterton Art Center called Changes
Mm.
that has all 79, well, the first 79 of the journal series, which is all of 2020. So I did a lot of weaving during 2020. But that exhibition has been really great for me because it shows the start of the journal series and the progression within that year. And then with me making um, the journal series weavings now out of my grandfather's hospital blanket, I mean, I never would have guessed it would have that kind of progression, but it literally is, you know, documentation of my life. So
Now, where is this exhibit so people can go see it if they'd like?
yeah, so it's the Chesterton Art Center in Chesterton, Indiana. The show runs until late February.
Is that outside of Chicago?
It is, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's maybe about 45 minutes to an hour out.
Oh, somebody just put it in the chat.
Yeah, thanks, Julia.
Yeah, thanks, Julia. Well, we have questions. So
Great.
why don't we go to those? And this is Landita Whaley. This is a good question. Did you find out you create better in a collaboration or working solo?
Hmm. Um, that's an interesting question because I feel like I've only ever created solo unless I'm doing like Chicago Artists Coalition was we had a group exhibition and then we had a two-person exhibition. So I've only ever collaborated in that way. But most of the time I'm creating by myself.
Oh, okay. Okay. This is from Alan Schumacher, Schumanko. Oh, Alan, I just destroyed your name. I'm so sorry. Hi, Brianna. I just love the thoughtful integration of texture in your pieces. I do too. They are just amazing. I was wondering if you ever have worked with electronics, e-textiles, where diodes and tiny speakers can be incorporated into each piece. In doing so, those interacting with the fabric piece can actually hear sounds, swish, or jingle to add to another dimension to your pieces.
I've never done that. I
Another
also
rabbit hole. There you go, Brianna.
yes, I've never done that. That actually sounds really cool, but no, I've never done that.
All right, Alan, y'all need to get together. Next project. Oh, somebody wants to know if you have a picture of your cardboard loom. I'm sorry, we don't have that, Laura, or I would have
Yeah,
posted it.
I was gonna, I don't have one. I actually don't use a cardboard loom anymore. The journal series pieces that I was just talking about are done on a shacked lily loom, which I think is like 10 by 15 inches. Um, just because I weave way too much, that cardboard loom has seen better days. So
Bet. Um, this is Carrie Gordon. Brianna, love your colorful pieces of handspun. The color and textures are alive. Are you, oh, this is good. Are you dyeing any of these yarns? Do you dye?
I did learn how to dye when I was at SAIC. It took a natural dyeing class. But no, I am not dyeing any of these yarns. A few of them in the journal series are dyed from actually that twist class. I had found some, I want to say it was Osage and onion skin
Mm.
yarn that I had spun. And so that's really the only one that's hand dyed by me.
Somebody wants to know how the Delta piece was hung. How was it mounted and hung? And when is the
That
plexiglass covering the whole piece?
that's a good question. They took the piece and then they installed it. But it is like a UV plexi. And then there are these like silver kind of circular attachments in each corner at the top and the bottom.
Mhm.
And then that adheres to the wall. But it's basically, yeah, it's plexied on both sides.
Oh, somebody wants to know, how do you attach the strands of hand spun to the warp? Do you use Raya knot or some other knotting technique? Oh, I meant to ask that too. I didn't know if that was woven in and hung out or knotted or.
That I am going to keep to myself. Um, yeah, I love that nobody knows that. So that I'm gonna hang on to.
I love that. I love
Yeah.
that. Um, Kathy Wilcox says you can call plain weave simple, but most people find it's most difficult to do well. That's true. It
Hmm.
shows a multitude of sins if you're not careful. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, I guess I call it simple because that's kind of what I learned in art school, right? It's like if you did plain weave, it was simple. If you were doing, overshots or double cloth or anything else, you were a little bit more advanced. And so I guess
Mm.
I use that language because that's how I was taught. But yeah, I mean, I think because that's all I do, yeah, I mean, there are some challenges that, I have from time to time.
People are asking again about the piece at the airport, and they say, "Is it readable?" That's a good question because we can't tell from the picture. Um, and what was the wart?
So the warp is cotton, not hand spun, just regular cotton. And it's not legible, no, because it was done through the paper shredder, and I'm using
Oh,
literally one strip of paper at a time and weaving it. No, it's not legible. You can actually, if you go to my website, you'll see a detail shot of it.
oh, okay. Sally's asking, how did you know you were not fulfilled when you first started your academic program before you pivoted over to fiber?
Um, there was not a lot of freedom I experienced um, in the painting department. You had to have a reason for everything, um, which I found to be really interesting because you're in an institution, you're learning, right? And so I just wanted to create and paint, right? Kind of like how I do with my work now. I'm just creating, just for the sake of creating and, um, wanting to kind of get out these emotions and things that I was feeling and am feeling. But yeah, I really didn't feel like I could be intuitive in that department at that time.
Are you still painting?
I did paint right after I left my job in 2019. I was offered a solo exhibition, and I had done these painted textiles. So I was weaving on the floor loom and then painting on top of that with acrylic and flexible modeling paste. And so that was really the last time I was painting, was
Oh, wow.
right after I left. Yeah.
Um, Christine Williamson says your weaving looks a lot like Saori weaving. Do you think you will do any traditional weaving? She has that in quotation marks.
Um, I don't know. I'm wondering, Christine, if you mean by traditional, like, I'm wondering what that word
Yeah,
means
I'm
for
not sure
you.
either.
I'd be curious to know, but yeah, I think for the most part, this is kind of where my head is in terms of like using found objects. Um, Again, thinking about mental health and trauma and grief and working on those things.
Carol Irving wants you to talk about the commission that you got from Delta. Did they approach you or did you approach them? And do you have an agent?
I do not have an agent. I was in Maine and I got an email that I thought was spam. Somebody had reached out and said, "We want the journal piece." And at first, I thought they were referring to the journal series pieces. And they said, "Nope, we went to Chicago Artists Coalition and we saw that piece and were really interested in it." And so I said, "Okay, hopefully I can get this piece to you in time enough for the installation." And so luckily that worked out.
Anne Marie Miller says there's so much texture in your work, but have you considered supplemental warps to change the dimension in even smaller pieces?
I haven't thought about that much. The way that that my work works is however it gets spun up on my spinning wheel is how it gets used. There's really no editing or anything like that involved.
Oh, Christine Williamson came back. She said traditional, she means by loom controlled structures, not plain weave.
Okay, thank you, Christine. Maybe at some point, you know, I feel like I might be eating my words, you know, a few years down the line. But for right now, I'm really interested in plain weave.
Therese Elron says the influence of Sheila Hicks, question mark. She said, I love her work and I love, love, love yours. And that's true. It is somewhat Sheila Hicks like. Is there it? Is she an influencer for you?
Yeah, I love her. Yeah, I mean, come on, her work is incredible. So yes, love her.
And Christine came back again. Oh, I do love your weaving and how you've integrated your life experiences and emotions. I have to. Sally said, you mentioned specific numbers in relation to your various series. Are these random quantities or do the numbers have meaning also? Oh, great question, Sally.
Oh, that is a good question. Yeah, they're all random. The quarantine series, yeah, being 51 and the natural series being much smaller than that. The journal series right now, because I started it in July of 2020, currently there's like 200 and some odd in that series and still counting. So yeah, they're just random quantities.
Do you have difficulty finding space to work in? I mean, do you work out of your home? Do you have a studio?
I do have a studio. I very rarely go to the studio unless I'm working on something large scale like Alone Against It All or the Afterpiece that was in Delta. But for the most part, I either work in my apartment. Most recently, I've been at my grandparents', so I've been weaving there. And then if I have, because the loom is so small, you can take it anywhere. I also work in different locations and things like that too, if I'm traveling.
Well, everybody always wants to know, what is your floor loom? What kind is it?
Oh, why am I blanking on that? Why am I blanking on that? I know it's 8 harness, 16 treadle, that I can tell you, but I am, for whatever reason, blanking on the name of my loom.
Sorry.
It's okay.
You know what'll
That just
happen,
goes
the
to
minute you get
show
done,
that,
you'll go, it's a blank blah blah.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, it's just because I haven't woven on it in so long. It's funny, I went to my studio earlier today and I looked at it and I was like, I haven't used you in a very long time. But yeah, I completely am blanking on the name of the loom. No.
Was there a learning curve after you got out of school? Was it the same kind of loom or did you have to learn how to use a different kind of loom?
No, it wasn't a learning curve at all, actually. SAAC has various different looms, and so it's pretty easy to find one that worked for me and then fit within my studio. So
Great. I thank you so much for being on here today and sharing your work and I feel like you shared part of yourself so much. Thank you. I appreciate you doing that. We look
yeah,
forward to seeing where you're going from here. We see big
thank
things
you.
coming for you. I
Thank
encourage you
you.
all to go to Brianna's website. A lot of people are talking about, you can see more of the Delta piece and the details of it. So check that out. Go to her website, briannabibbs.com, and you can see a lot more of her work. We also want to thank our sponsors today, the Weavers of North Shore, and a couple of people. Thank you, Julia. Posted where they're from. Somebody was asking where they're from, and they're from the Chicago area. And in the chat, they posted exactly where you can find them and get a hold of them. We appreciate them coming in and hosting one from their neck of the woods. If you're interested in hosting a episode of Textiles and Tea, you can, whether you're a guild or a person or a business, you can decide the date you want and just let us know. You can go online and purchase it, or you can give me a call or anybody at the office. And we would love to have you come and be part of Textiles and Tea with us. Small Expressions is touring. The Small Expressions from 2023 is touring throughout the U.S. It's going to be at Yadkin Valley Fiber Center until February the 15th. So if you are in the North Carolina area, you might want to put that on your agenda to go check out Small Expressions. From there, it's going to go to I think it's called Surratt Gallery at Vanderbilt University in Nashville. So again, if you happen to be in that area, you can go check them out and see the exhibit there. You can also learn more about the exhibit before you go, which is kind of neat. If you can't be there and see the jurors talk in person, you can watch it online. It's going to be a virtual jurors talk. It will be Wednesday, the 31st, 2024 at 2 p.m. Eastern time. And Alice Wood, who's the juror, will talk about her selection, what she saw and reacted to in the work. She's going to talk about individual works, what she saw in them, the strengths of some of these works. It'll be a great talk. And especially if you intend to go see it, it would be wonderful to hear the talk and then go. If you can't go see it, you're going to see some incredible images online. If it's a Zoom event, so it's recorded. So if you can't see it live, you can go back and watch it later or watch it again. It's always nice to be able to do that. It's $10 for student members, individual members, and professional artist members. And then it's more if you want to just watch it and you're not a member. You can register or call the office. You can go online or call the office and register for this event. Next up, the Guild Development Retreat. It is January the 27th. Boy, that's coming up fast. And it's going to have, it's an online event. It has panels and discussions. And the idea is that it's one day that people can gather together and share information. It strengthens, I think, the leadership, that you learn more and become a better leader when you go back to your guild. I think it unites the guilds, unites all the different organizations when they have the opportunity to share. And it's a platform for sharing, and you can tell what worked for you, what didn't work for you, and just a wonderful way to share ideas. There's a wealth of information out there, and we're trying to pull people together to share that. The topics will be a guild sale, diversity inclusion, developing your board, and keeping up and staying relevant in a technological world. If you want to participate, affiliate guilds will get 4 free attendees. Then it's $20 for HGA members. And if you're not a member, it's $50. So if you're going as part of your guild, you might be one of those 4, or if you just want to attend on your own, you can do that also. Thank you so much for joining us today, and thank you for joining and donating. The money that comes from donations and membership are a way that we can provide these different programs. That money comes and we can do Textiles and Tea, we can do Spinning and Weaving Week, the Guild Retreat. All of that is financed through your membership and your donations, and we appreciate that. Next week, we have Betty Ashington from Becky, not Betty. If you know Becky, she's interesting, and it's going to be a lively conversation. So I hope you'll all join us, Steve and Becky, next week. Have a wonderful week. We're glad you joined us today, and we'll look forward to seeing you next Tuesday. Happy tea.